Hey guys, it's Barbie and Flora with Two Friends in the Bible.
Hello.
We are doing another Bible trivia, so welcome to our page. In this trivia, we're going to give you hints about our person in the Bible and see if you can guess who this person is. If you need to pause the video and look in your Bible, that may help, or if you just want to wait to the end, that's fine. We're not going to reveal who our person is until the very end. So let's get the fun started. Here we go. Our person is the most frequently mentioned human in the Old Testament and the second most frequently mentioned human in the entire Bible. Only Jesus Christ is mentioned more. Our person is the main character in the Old Testament books of 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, and 2 Chronicles, and is also mentioned in several other books as well. But what makes our person such a significant biblical figure is their role in establishing God's earthly headquarters in Jerusalem. Despite glaring flaws, our person is described as a man after God's own heart. 1 Samuel 13:14 and Acts 13:22. Far from perfect, but their faith and zeal set the standard against which all Israel's future kings will be measured against. So who is our person? What do we know about them? In this trivia, we'll cover the basic facts about who they are and what the Bible says about them. The Bible gives us a lot of information about our person between 1 and 2 Samuel. Our person's book in the Bible that he wrote a lot of in 1 Chronicles, you could probably practically write his biography. Don't worry, it's been done many, many times. Laura, you want to go ahead and do some more clues for us?
Sure. Our person is from the tribe of Judah. The 12 tribes of Israel descended from Jacob's 12 sons, and with the exception of Levi, each tribe controlled a specific territory within the nation of Israel. Judah was the son who prevailed over his brothers, 1 Chronicles 5:2. And while Saul, Israel's first king, was from the tribe of Benjamin, Judah became the tribe of kings. Judah's territory included the city of Jerusalem. When our person became king, they established Jerusalem as the nation's capital and God's headquarters, permanently altering Judah's importance in Jewish life and culture. This person's line ruled in Jerusalem for about 400 years until King Nebuchadnezzar captured the city and broke the line of kings. The book of Ruth is a story of love and redemption. It uses the relationships between a man named Boaz and a woman named Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi to paint a picture of God's compassion for Israel. Our person is a direct descendant of Ruth and Boaz. Several passages record his lineage, making him the great-grandson of this significant couple, and you can find that in 1 Chronicles 2:12. Redemption ran in the family over the course of their life. Our person was frequently the vehicle God used to display his compassion and redeem his people. After their death, he became a symbol of God's unique relationship with Israel and the redemption that was still to come. Today, most people associate the little town of Bethlehem with the birth of Jesus. But centuries before Jesus, another important person, our person, came from this unassuming town. The Gospel of Luke refers to Bethlehem as the town of our person, Luke 2:4, because it was well known that this was our person's old stomping grounds, and it was where Samuel anointed him king of God's people. While modern readers tend to focus on Jesus' birth in a manger, it's important to consider the implications that this manger was in Bethlehem, a town the Jewish people associated with one of the biggest announcements in their history, where their most important king had his humble beginnings.
Lots of information yet. Y'all starting to get an idea? Some more clues. God's anointed one was the person he chose to lead and to save his people. When the Israelites wanted a human king, the prophet Samuel anointed Saul to show that God has set him apart for this special role. Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, "Has not the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance?" 1 Samuel 10:1. Years later, when Saul disobeyed God, God rejected him as king. 1 Samuel 15:26. And it was time for God to choose someone else. So he sent Samuel to Jesse of Bethlehem, telling him, I have chosen one of his sons to be king. 1 Samuel 16:1. Samuel thought he would know whom God had chosen by their appearance and assumed the oldest, Eliab, was clearly the chosen one. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. 1 Samuel 16:6. But God tells Samuel he doesn't use the same factors of people when it comes to choosing kings. Do not consider his appearance or his height, for however have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Earlier, Samuel had prophesied to Saul, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. 1 Samuel 13:14. And when Samuel laid eyes upon Jesse's son, the shepherd, or person, the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. When Samuel anointed a person, it didn't instantly make him king, but it did signal that he was the Lord's chosen one. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon our person. 1 Samuel 16:13. Laura, you want to give us some more?
Before he was king, our person was a shepherd. This was why he wasn't with his brothers when Samuel came to anoint the next king. That's in 1 Samuel 16:11. And when the Philistines invaded, he was torn between his duties as Saul's musician and his responsibility for tending his father's sheep. 1 Samuel 17:15. As a shepherd, he didn't merely feed and lead his father's sheep. While a shepherd may seem like an inconsequential position, it was still dangerous. He killed bears and lions alike to defend his father's sheep. Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. And that's in 1 Samuel 17:34-37. In his confrontation with the Philistine, he would care for Yahweh's flock, the people of Israel, and once again defend his father's sheep from harm. This time the Lord would rescue him from a foe that Saul and his entire army were terrified of. 1 Samuel 17:11. Later, he used his experience as a shepherd to create one of the most powerful portrayals of God's relationship with his people, foreshadowing the Good Shepherd Jesus, and that's in John 10:11. Many years before Samuel anointed him and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, Samuel anointed Saul, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul. 1 Samuel 10:1-6. When our person was anointed, the Spirit of the Lord left Saul, and an evil spirit began to torment him. That's in 1 Samuel 16:14. Saul's servants believed a musician would help soothe Saul whenever the spirit came to torment him. And it just so happened that our person was a talented musician. So Saul had him brought in and made him one of his armor bearers. Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, our person would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul. He would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. 1 Samuel 16:23. And Barbie, can you give us some more clues?
I sure can. As you can tell so far, our person is got a lot of different talents. From this point on, our person's duties were divided between watching his father's sheep and playing music for the king. Perhaps our person's biggest claim to fame was his legendary showdown with the Philistine. The Israelite and the Philistine armies lined up on the opposing hills and taunted the Israelites and challenged them to decide the battle with a duel, him against one of them. 1 Samuel 17:8-11. Nobody wanted to take him up on the offer. But our person came to the Israelite camp to play music for Saul, and he heard the Philistines' taunts. He also overheard the Israelites talking about what Saul would give to the person who defeated the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:23 through 27. This Philistine wasn't just taunting the Israelites, he was defying God himself on God's own turf. Every day, Israel declined this Philistine's challenge. They conceded that their God was no match for the gods of the Philistines. Our person wasn't going to let this go on any longer. After convincing Saul to let him challenge the Philistine, he chose 5 stones and went out to meet him. The Philistine mocked him and cursed him. And then our person famously replied, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that this is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Our person killed the Philistine with a single stone, hurling it from his sling. He beheaded him and took his weapons as trophies. The story has been told so many times through literature and art, their confrontation have all become cliched symbols for underdogs, brutal antagonists, and stories of overcoming impossible odds. But in the Bible, this is not an underdog story. It's a story of faith. Our person's faith will become one of his defining characteristics, and it led him to overcome countless enemies after the Philistine. Flora?
That was a big clue. Some of y'all may have guessed by now, but let's give some more clues. Defeating the Philistine marked the beginning of his life as a warrior. Wherever Saul sent him, God went with him, and he was successful. And the more successful he became, the more responsibility Saul gave him. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, he was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. 1 Samuel 18:5. But then people started to see him as greater than Saul. After the Israelites defeated the Philistines, women danced and sang. Saul has slain his thousands, and our person his tens of thousands. And you can find that in 1 Samuel 18:7. Understandably, this made Saul feel threatened by him. As our person's fame as a warrior grew, Saul feared him more and more. This fear led Saul to drive away his greatest asset. He attempted to kill our person on multiple occasions and became his constant enemy. After Saul died in battle with the Philistines, our person warred against Saul's commander, Abner, and Saul's last son, Ishbosheth, whom Abner had made king of Israel. Eventually, our person became king. More on how that happened in just a moment, and continued his legacy as a great warrior. Despite being anointed to rule God's people, our person had a long and arduous path to kingship. Even after Saul died in combat, those loyal to him weren't just going to hand over the kingdom to him. Remember, Saul was anointed too, and our person had been living with and fighting for the Philistines, the Israelites' sworn enemies.
Yeah.
Barbie, can you?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'll definitely give some more information. When Saul died, the tribe of Judah anointed our person as their king, 2 Samuel 2:4. But Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, Saul's son, Ishbosheth, over all Israel. So there were 2 kings and 2 kingdoms. Ishbosheth became the second king of Israel, and our person ruled Judah. Unfortunately for Ishbosheth, his reign was short-lived. While he and Abner were at war with our person the whole time he was in power, Ishbosheth didn't die by our person's hands. Ishbosheth and Abner were murdered. Abner was out of revenge, and our person cursed his killers and mourned his death. Ishbosheth was murdered by Israelites who seemed to be trying to earn our person's favor. When they came to him with their good news, he had them executed for their crime. With Saul's family out of the picture, Israel elders met with our person and anointed him king over all of Israel when he was 30 years old. 2 Samuel 5, 3-4. During Saul's reign, Jerusalem was captured, and the Ark of the Covenant was in Judah. When our person became king, he retook the fortress of Zion, which became known as the city of our person, conquered Jerusalem, and returned the ark to the city. As king of Israel, our person won numerous battles and made Israel a formidable nation, expanding its territory and military might, all while pointing his people to God. When his armies were out waging war without him, he walked along the roof of his palace and saw a beautiful woman bathing. He sent someone to find out about her and learned that she was married to Uriah the Hittite, one of his best soldiers. 2 Samuel 23:39.
And Barbie, now this was hundreds of years before Jesus looking at a woman lustfully was committing adultery in your heart. And that's Matthew 5:27-28. But at this point, it was pretty clear to our person that this was not a relationship he could pursue. The Torah had a thing or two to say about adultery. Leviticus 18:20, Deuteronomy 5:18, and Exodus 20:14. And it was punishable by death. Deuteronomy 22:22 and Leviticus 20:10. Our person knew all that, but he sent for her anyway, slept with her, and got her pregnant. 2 Samuel 11:4-5. When he learned she was pregnant, he hatched a scheme to hide his sin. Since her husband Uriah was away at war, he had him brought back home. If Uriah slept with her, then no one could say he was the one who got her pregnant. But it didn't work out that way. After our person's repeated attempts to get Uriah to spend time with his wife, Uriah told him, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." 2 Samuel 11:11. So to hide his sin, our person committed another one. Our person killed a lot of people in battle. He killed a lot of prisoners after battles, and he executed plenty of criminals. But one killing in particular displeased the Lord. 2 Samuel 11:27. When our person couldn't get Uriah to sleep with his wife, Bathsheba, and therefore conceal his adultery, he plotted to have Uriah killed in combat. In the morning, our person wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in our person's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. 2 Samuel 11:14-17. In order to have Uriah killed in battle, Joab had to sacrifice some of our person's other men. And Joab feared he would be angry for the waste. 2 Samuel 11:20. But our person was rather indifferent. He told Joab's messenger, "Say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab." 2 Samuel 11:25. The lives of God's people were simply collateral damage in our person's effort to cover up his sin. Once Uriah was dead and Bathsheba had time to mourn him, our person married her and she gave birth to a son. Later, the prophet Nathan rebuked our person for his sin. Nathan told a story about a rich man who stole a prized lamb from a poor man. Our person condemned the man in the story, unaware that it was a metaphor for what he'd done to Uriah with Bathsheba. 2 Samuel 12:1-10. Nathan told him that the Lord has taken away your sin. 2 Samuel 12:13. But he also cursed him, and the son who came from our person's adultery died.
I tell you, you read something like that, it's hard to love this person as much as most people do, but then we have to remember we all do stupid things. And when you do one sin, one lie, you got to do more and more and more to cover up for it. And this is the consequences of it.
It is.
Our person committed a grave sin, but after his encounter with Nathan, he wrote a poem in the Bible, in a book in the Bible, which reflects his humility and sincere repentance for what he'd done. Before he anointed our person, the prophet Samuel rebuked Saul and warned him, "The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart." 1 Samuel 13:14. Our person is the only person referred to this way in the Bible, but the Bible doesn't explicitly tell us what Samuel meant by this. It's possible that he simply meant he cared about the things God cared about. It's also possible that we learn something of the character of God through the character in him. In Acts 13:22, Paul appears to give an explanation. After removing Saul, he made our person their king. God testified concerning him, "I have found our person, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do." It appears that Samuel called our person a man after God's own heart because of his obedience. But it's also worth noting, God forbid our person from building his temple because he has shed blood. 1 Chronicles 28:3. So there seems to be some discrepancy between our person and God's heart. Here's a fun fact for you. The passage Paul quotes looks different than the version of 1 Samuel 13:14, and that you'll probably find in your Bible. That's because Paul was quoting an early Greek manuscript of the Old Testament known as the Septuagint, and most modern Bibles use the original Hebrew from the Masoretic text for Old Testament passages. Interesting. The Bible doesn't explicitly say when our person lived, but many scholars believe he existed around 1000 BC. A stone inscription known as the Tel Dan stele dates from the late 9th or early 8th century BC, and it refers to the house of our person. Another inscription from around 840 BC, the Moab stele, S-T-E-L-E, may refer to our person as well. Parts of 1st and 2nd Samuel were written as early as the 7th and 6th century BCs, likely using earlier accounts as sources. Our person has numerous wives and concubines. The Bible names 8 wives, but it's possible he had more. They are Ahinoam of Jezreel, Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, Micaiah, daughter of Talmaliah, king of Geshur, Haggith, Abital, Eglah, Michael, daughter of Saul, and Bathsheba. The Bible doesn't give a comprehensive list of our person's wives, but 2 Samuel 3:2-5 tells us the names of his sons as well as 6 of his wives, and he marries Michal, 1 Samuel 18:27, and Bathsheba, 2 Samuel 11:27, and other passages.
Mm-hmm. And Barbie, our person was a talented musician. He also put his God-given creativity to work as a songwriter. Throughout the Old Testament narrative, we see him write laments and songs to commemorate important moments and express deep emotions, such as when he learns that Saul and Jonathan died, 2 Samuel 1:19-27. While this book in the Bible is often mistakenly assumed to be the biggest book of the Bible, our person actually didn't write that much of the Bible in comparison to authors like Moses, Ezra, Luke, Jeremiah, and Paul. They each wrote at least 32,000 words, and the entire book of the Bible that our person helped to write, some is only about 30,000. Most of the book of the Bible our person wrote are laments, giving us intimate portraits of his darkest moments. But he also wrote songs of praise and thanksgiving, and frequently declared his trust in the Lord in spite of his circumstances. It's fitting that our person is such a prominent figure in the Old Testament, because as an imperfect human, anointed by God to save and rule his people, he lays the foundation for Jesus Christ, the only sinless human whom God would use to save and rule all of humanity.
Yeah, and I know this one was longer than our usual Bible trivias, but this one had so much information that it just information that needed to be given. So our person, though, as you know, is a very important person in the Bible. Some of you might have known right away from the clues. He wrote a lot of the book of the Bible, in the Bible of Psalms. That might have helped. But if you don't know, drum roll, please. King David. Whoop, whoop. Yeah. And one of the things you know is Jesus comes from the line of King David, and King David is going to be playing a very, very important part in the millennial. So he made some pretty big mistakes with the Bathsheba thing. Was concerned, but he was overall, you know, you can't look at someone for a bad decision versus the thousands of good ones that he did. I mean, we're all human and we make mistakes, and he repented of it. So he was a very, very good king. And absolutely think he's, you know, he was definitely the best king they've ever had. So very interesting for sure.
I enjoyed that.
I did too. I did too.
One thing that came to me, I just want to say very quickly. It's a wonderful story because you hear people all the time say, I've been so bad, there's no way God would forgive me. God will forgive you. Just keep that in mind. I mean, this is a prime example. Adultery, murder, God forgave him. So just give it to God, ask for forgiveness, and our God's a loving God.
Yeah. That doesn't mean go out and kill someone so you can have their wife and then think you can go and ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah.
Don't work that way. Usually it's when you suscept, you know, it's like with David, he suscepted himself to sin and he allowed himself to lust. And that lust became a bigger sin, which resulted in pregnancy, and then having to hide that pregnancy and lie about that pregnancy. And you know, and kind of in a way, I think he was protecting Bathsheba, not just himself, but Bathsheba, because, you know, it would have looked really bad on her because she was the, you know, women back then didn't amount, you know, they weren't really, you know. So I think he was protecting her as well, but yeah, unfortunately, Uriah was the innocent one in the whole thing. So anyway, we just have to remember everyone's humans and we all make mistakes. But I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for our next one. Y'all have a good day. Talk to you later.
You too.